my report is basically to show you the effects of how the exemptions will reduce the amount of EAV that is presented to the county from the city. As the amount of exemptions increase, it shifts the tax burden over to different property owners that don't receive the exemption. Typically, the home exemptions shift the burden to the commercial property. So, is there any questions?
Questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Scudder. Appreciate it. Next, are there any public comments related exclusively to township issues? Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Trustee Cabillo and second by Trustee Craybill. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. We will begin in 1 minute, and I apologize for our lateness, the regular meeting. So a 1 minute bathroom break. Okay.
For sure, yeah. And people are just, like, they just don't know how to reach out. So, like, they reach out to me, I don't
going to begin soon. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, anybody else have a comment card? Just because we ran over the previous meeting. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting of the Bloomington City Council to order. If everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey?
Here.
Councilmember Bolin?
Here.
Councilmember Milwampwe?
Here.
Councilmember Emig?
Present.
Councilmember Painter?
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Here.
Councilmember Black? Here. Councilmember Crable?
Here.
Councilmember Bray?
Here.
Mayor Renner?
Here. Thank you very much. At this point, we're going to begin with recognitions and appointments. I'm going to start with the presentation of the City of Bloomington Police Department's Police Officers Commission Certificate to officers who have completed probation. Mitchell Filarski and Taylor Turner, and I'm going to turn this over to our chief and others, and any other members of the police department. Please come on up and come on behind us.
Mayor and Council of the Police Department is pleased to present two officers who are coming off their probation for their formal swearing in. To my left here we have Taylor Turner and Mitchell Filarski. Taylor's wife, Melissa, and his parents, Robert and Krista, are in the audience, back there in the corner. Officer Turner was hired on April 16, 2018. Prior to accepting a position with the BPD, Taylor worked for the Vermilion Valley Regional Dispatch Center. Try to say that 3 times fast. Taylor graduated from Illinois Valley Community College, where he received an associate's in criminal justice. Mitchell's father, Chuck, is attending, also in the back. Officer Filarski was hired also on April 16, 2018. Prior to accepting a position with BPD, Officer Filarski worked at the Bass Pro Shop as an operations support specialist for approximately 3 years. He graduated from Western Illinois University, where he participated in the Centennial Honors College, which is a significant honors program when I looked at the requirements. He also graduated summa cum laude. He has also, while on probation, received the life-saving accommodation while working with us at BPD. It's my pleasure to present them to you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm going to do these in alphabetical order. And if any of the friends, relatives, others would like to come forward, please feel free to come forward and huddle up. This is your dais as well. Anyway, you don't have to. Okay. Well, I'm going to start with Mitchell Filarski. The Police Officers Commission, by authority of the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners of the City of Bloomington, by the City of Bloomington, in the County of McLean, in the State of Illinois, we do hereby certify that Mitchell D. Filarski, having been duly sworn, was appointed and commissioned as a police officer on the 17th of April, 2018. As evidence thereof, we set our hand to this seal. Mitchell, if you want to come forward. Thank you and congratulations. Thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate it. And next, we have Taylor Turner. Again, the Police Officers Commission, by authority of the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners of the City of Bloomington and the County of McLean in the State of Illinois, we do here certify that Taylor Day Turner, having been duly sworn, was appointed and commissioned as a police officer on the 17th of April, 2018. And the evidence hereof, we set our hand and seal. Congratulations. Thank you for everyone. Chief, anything else you want to add? Okay, thank you, and thank you to all of our first responders. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation of the winners of the 2019 Beautification Awards as presented by the Beautification Committee. And I'm going to go ahead and ask our distinguished chair of the Beautification Committee to come on down. All right. And you've got an assistant.
Want to introduce yourself first?
Oh, sure. I'm Sarah.
Sarah, welcome. Thanks.
As the council knows, every year the Beautification Committee asks for nominations for homes, and then we go out and we look at them all, and each person in the committee votes, and we tally the votes, and we come up with the winners. And these are usually people that have put an extra effort into what they've done with their house, be it how nicely painted it is or the yard. It can be anything that draws your attention. But usually it's a house that when you turn the corner, you know right away which one you're looking at. And there's also businesses on here, and all of them have taken extra efforts with the outside of their business. So we'd like to recognize them also. So we'll get started. Let's see if I can do it right this year. First this puts me far away. First we have the mural at Market, I forgot the other street. Market and Morris. Very good, thank you. And accepting the award, we have the Illinois Art Station, the Westside Bloomington Revitalization Project, and the City of Bloomington. Come down and shake hands. You don't actually take home the award.
Yeah.
It'll be mounted next to the mural on the wall there.
Thank you.
Is anybody here from Art Station?
That's me.
Oh, you're Art Station, okay. Is anybody here from Revitalization?
Well, then it's all you, Robin.
Hey.
Oh, there is. Oh, great. Yeah.
Come on up. Joel was the artist.
Come on, Lori, great. Come on. Come on, come on.
And I'll just put in a little plug for the Beautification Committee. Since the mural's been done, the Beautification Committee has been working on cleaning up the area, picking up the trash. We planted a flower bed across from it. The hill that was just all that ragged weeds, we got all the trash out of it so it could be mowed, and we have further plans to either put the whole thing in flowers or put some flower beds in that area.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you for coming. And it'll be mounted on the wall next to the mural. Okay? Get to shake the mayor's hand. All of you, come this way. I should have seen it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I didn't keep going through the pictures. Next we have St. Mary's Parish. Accepting is Father Greg. Maybe? Oh, I'm sorry.
Individuals for one person. Yes. Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Thank you very much.
And they put in a flower garden on the side of the church?
In between the church and the rectory.
Okay. Good job.
Thank you.
Can you take the mayor's hand?
and,
For the work you did, or
well,
whoever did it.
our parish did, so thank you very much.
Let's see if I can get this. Next we have, I'm not going to say his last name right, Patrick Fruin. Did I?
Flingers.
Woo! For Flingers, you can see from this picture he has a lot of flowers outside, and if you even just drive around the building, he's got flower pots and flowers everywhere.
Congratulations.
Right, yeah. Well, you can put it outside of your business. I will. I'll take it, yeah. Next, we have Shirley Hartley for the Memory Garden. Is there someone here to accept this? Are you her son-in-law? Her son-in-law?
Hi, I'm
And what's your name?
Doug Smith.
This is Doug Smith, her son-in-law accepting.
Yes, she passed on the 5th.
She passed away between the time we voted and now, so that's why her son-in-law is here for her. But this memory garden is something to see. If you're ever near Bissell, take the turn and look for it. It's gorgeous. I think I have another picture.
Nope.
Nope.
One.
Okay.
Anyway.
Get your award and put it out there in the garden.
No, it's the memory garden.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we had John Wilson and Craig Gilsinger. Ooh, good. I'm on a roll this year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.
It's a nice job. Thank you for doing that. And our last recipient is Catherine Mundell Bly, who is a teacher at Bloomington Junior High.
For 130-something more days.
Beautiful garden. And I believe that concludes, and that's our last picture, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Beautification Committee. Thank you, Robin. Okay. Next, we move right along to public comment, and just so that everyone knows, if you want some immediate answers to questions, you're certainly welcome to come back to the fishbowl, to the table that we have back there on Fridays from 4:30 to 5:30 before regular city council meetings, and you can ask questions about something that's on the agenda or anything else. So if you want immediate answers or you want to engage with us, that's the opportunity to do so. There are others, of course, if you want to give us a phone call or email us, but public comment, our general policy is to not respond, so it's basically up to 3 minutes each that people have. And I'm going to go ahead and read these in groups of 3 so you can prepare so we can move through this as expeditiously as possible. And we have Dave Halt, Serena Fish, and Leah Klein. Father?
Honorable servants of this community, you do important work, but personally I find politics as enjoyable to watch as making sausage, as you've all heard. I try to be politically neutral as much as possible, but I stand before you asking that you can seriously consider slowing down what seems to be a headlong rush into the cannabis business. We do not know enough about whether or not this business is a right fit for our city, a term that I have heard used by members on a regular basis. We don't have the data. In looking at the law, it looks like we lose home rule by allowing cannabis to come in. Unlike liquor and restaurants with liquor licenses and facilities to sell liquor, we don't have the ability, according to this law, as I can read it, to say, hold, wait, pull a license, or any of that. Everything devolves to state control, state licensing, and state regulation. We don't have enough data at this point to know whether or not this is a right fit in terms of the health and welfare of our community. We do not know the impact of selling cannabis, legality aside, selling cannabis in our city. We don't know the impact of that. There's not been enough time for other communities to deal with all of the issues that may be raised by this. So I'm asking you on behalf of our city to just slow down. There's nothing lost with taking time and doing it right. It's a law that has been passed. You have the option to opt in, but being an early adopter really gets us nothing if it's the wrong decision and the wrong fit. Please, for our community, slow down. Take the time, empower the zoning commission to really investigate what is important, what the data is, and then come back with the decision. We have one chance to get it right, and if we get it wrong, our entire community will pay. Thank you.
Thank you. Serena Fish, Leah Klein, and Aaron Lenev.
Good evening. I'm basically going to echo what the gentleman before me said. Slow down. Time was short, but this task force chose to only meet 3 times when they could have met 2 or 3 times a week instead of once. The task force presented only 10 opinions from 10 people. They had lots of info on other states, but almost no local. They had almost no community input, educational, religious, neighborhood, or ward meetings, and did not attend when invited to one even. At this point in decision-making for the city of Bloomington, it is all about zoning, taxing, and legal interpretation if we opt in and when. There is no one on the task force that has these expertises, so I would recommend city staff and city council go forward with the people who do have the expertise, which was not included in the selection of the original task force members, and consider the task force concluded, and all future considerations are now providence of city staff and city council. We elected you people to take care of this city. Please do too. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah Klein, Aaron, and R.J. McCracken.
Good evening. You'll be surprised to know I'm not here to speak about cannabis. Relieved. My name is Leah Klein, and I am the chairperson of the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm at the podium this evening to lend my support for your regular agenda item 8A, the professional services agreement with the Lakota Group to create a community preservation plan for the city of Bloomington. The current preservation plan for our city dates to 2004. As part of the city's comprehensive planning process, it was recommended that plans such as these be revised and updated every 5 years. As such, a revision to the community preservation plan is well overdue. In addition to its age, the current community preservation plan has several limitations that we seek to remedy with this new plan. The new plan will be rooted in substantial public feedback, something that was really not the focus of the prior plan, and will address significant elements of our city's historic infrastructure not treated in the current plan. For instance, Route 66 is not mentioned as part of our preservation plan. Lastly, the Lakota plan will provide us with actionable items to help us make informed decisions about process, planning, and zoning ordinances as it relates to preservation. all aspects of our current plan and working order that have received negative comment from residents in the past, and we haven't had any avenue in order to fix them. As HPC commissioners, we see the opportunity to work with the Lakota Group as a significant step forward in our efforts to meet the recommendations of Bring It On Bloomington and to better serve the interests of Bloomington's residents. Professional work on plans like the Community Preservation Plan is expensive, and as with all things, you get what you pay for. The Lakota Group's plan represents a substantial improvement over our current plan. And knowing that this cost would be considerable, the Community Development Office preemptively sought out and was awarded a $30,000 grant from the Illinois Preservation Agency to offset the total cost to our city. The remainder of the cost is already in the Community Development's FY 2020 budget, and thus it does not require the approval of any additional monies from you. While I understand that it is easy for some to see the preservation of historic infrastructure as backward-looking, I hope that you will instead see this plan in the way that the community development staff and the HPC commissioners do, as an economic development tool that is very much forward-looking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aaron, R.J. McCracken, and then Tyler Hargis.
What up, space people? Yeah, so the last time I come up here, I realized that none of you know nothing about weed, period. So I hopped in the car and drove to Colorado and bought a bunch of weed. I think I spent like $200, and the city's got something like, I don't know, close to, 15, 20 bucks, but if you repeat that over and over and over again, that starts adding up. That's not including the extra income from people that get the munchies, they want to run down to Luca Grill, eat a pie, or like 6, like you're missing out, especially you two. Like I heard y'all on the radio, y'all are a joke. Y'all, with the reefer madness, ain't never caused nobody ever to have schizophrenia, ever. That's methamphetamine and cocaine and heroin. You're wrong. You're dead damn wrong. It has never done that. It's safer than peanut butter. Peanut butter has killed more people than pot ever has because nobody's ever died from pot. Never. And you guys are missing out on the hugest chunk of money. It might be 3%. We tried to get 5%. But it's 3%, and you're not looking at the extra income. It's not even about making it a weed destination. It's about bringing in income that's going to help this community. And if you vote against it, you're voting against this town. You can listen to this church guy yak all he wants, but the truth of it is my spiritual path came through cannabis. And so did many other people. There's Rastafarianism. There's different parts of Hinduism that have cannabis related to it. So it's a religious thing, too. And you haven't done any homework. None. You haven't either. You need to do your homework, too.
Aaron, if you could.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, we have R.J. McCracken, Tyler Harris, and then Deb Carter.
I'd like to thank the council, the city staff, and the mayor for their service to the community. I very much appreciate what you do. And to not echo what everyone says, please hurry up. There's money to be made here. There are investors who are waiting on our decision, who want to develop real estate. Put it out in the middle of nowhere. When the zoning meeting comes up here and when you talk about where you want it to be, put it as far away from every school, church, and everything you want. Just keep it inside of Bloomington. The revenue could be used for many things. The state of Colorado, all but or if entirely, I don't want to misquote, funds their Department of Education through the sale of cannabis and the taxation on it. I'm not saying that we can do that here. We can't do that because we're just a city. But that 3% and the money that we won't be turning away, it's things that we could use if we earmark them. Many of the objections I've heard are concerns for children. Why don't we invest the 3% in after-school programs for our less fortunate children? or lunch programs for the kids who don't get to eat every day. There are things we could do with that money and earmark it so that it benefits our community in a way that everyone can get on board with it. We don't have to be black and white about it. I understand your objections. I understand that you're concerned for children, but kids still drink alcohol, and that's on every street corner in our town. There are liquor stores across the street from schools, and we still let that happen. Put the pot on the outside of the town, earmark the money for something that benefits all of us and benefits the kids if that's who we're really worried about. Let's find a middle ground. Let's be happy. It doesn't have to be an alienating issue that makes all of us hate each other or make people think that they're outraged because reefer madness is going to take over our town. It's not. They're going to still smoke. It's going to be legal here, no matter what we do. So why would we turn away the money that we could actually use to help our community and send our people to Normal so that they can pay Normal's taxes and make them some money? That's outrageous. Why would we send someone somewhere else when we could very easily regulate it, be very careful about it, and put it in a safe place? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Tyler Hargis, Deb Carter, and Zach Gittrich.
Hello again. My name is Tyler Hargis, and I'm one of the members of your community. I've been born and raised here, and cannabis has provided me a second opportunity at life after I started having seizures when I was 21. It's now provided me a career path as well as an opportunity to create a nonprofit community group that I try to do to help create opportunities in your community and to build up the community. So that's, I mean, if we're talking about how we can help our community, I'm trying my best with the opportunity that I have while using cannabis to do so. I keep hearing people discuss edibles as an issue, maybe making them taste negative. Well, there's children out there, such as a couple of them that I met that have seizures, and having that medicine taste appetizing is part of the reason why they use it, because they have lost their appetite due to a severe illness. And if you do that, it's an unnecessary thing because I could go use a concentrate or an RSO oil and make my own edibles. So the reason I bring that up is let's stop looking to make unnecessary like examples or unnecessary issues whenever the issue shouldn't even be brought up in the first place. We should be focusing on how we can make revenue by bringing in cannabis and opting in for it. We should be looking at opportunities where we can help build for our kids. We do keep bringing up children, but the reason that kids have access to cannabis is a black market system. Bring in recreational cannabis and you have it regulated where they can only get it if you are 21 and you have an ID to receive it. That makes it harder for kids to get it. Whenever you create boundaries for that, black market comes in and fills in that gap, and that's how kids are getting that cannabis. Sorry. If we're looking for data, there's plenty of other states out there that have data and have plenty of examples on how they've built their communities while having cannabis become recreationally legal in their state. And I think we just need to look at those things. It's not hard to go Google those things. We have access to so much data. We just need to go out there and look for it. It's not hard to look for those things. We also have plenty of dispensaries that have paperwork, they have information for you, terpenes, cannabinoids, the actual medicinal benefits for these things. If you guys go to these places that are already up and established, they have the information you're seeking. So if you want the info, go seek it. I accidentally created this nonprofit community group. Every single event I do is aimed at building the community by raising money for different programs in our community, education to the public so they can learn about terpenes and cannabinoids, and building a community. So let that stuff happen. It's already here. It's already coming. Just let us do what we need to do and build it as it needs to be. If we're worried about kids, make it benefit kids.
Thank you very much. Deb Carter, Zach Gittrich, and Kelly Dyson.
Good evening. I'm Deb Carter. I'm a 45-year resident of Bloomington Normal. 25 of those years has been spent in Ward 3. I want to announce that I personally believe in abstinence. This is my personal and strong belief as an addiction therapist. However, abstinence does not work for everyone, and there are ERs, treatment facilities, and frankly, cemeteries that are full of people with failed attempts at abstinence. Treatment facilities are beginning to use what they call MAT, medically assisted treatment, for those addicted to serious drugs like opiates. This involves pharmaceuticals,
uh, physician monitoring and treatment. Now, this is also called harm reduction, similar to when a heroin addict would take methadone, be prescribed methadone instead. It's a stepping down. Cannabis can also be used as a harm reduction for those more addictive substances as a quality of life. Using legal cannabis as a form of harm reduction would give the patient control over what they need to have in a legal and systematized way. It would cut out the big pharma, and it would give the patient more autonomy. What we're talking about, in my anecdotal opinion, and what I've roughly estimated from my 25 years in addiction, is about 30 to 40% of our Bloomington adult residents use cannabis right now. Surprise. It's your friends, it's your coworkers. There's a great number of white, upper middle class, professional people, lawyers, bankers, people that you wouldn't know. The reason why you do not know this is because of the stigma. It's illegal, but these people are all buying it on the black market. Now, January 1st, cannabis is going to be legal whether we like it or not. And last week, while we were here being cross-examined about the process of the task force, Normal was moving ahead. And I would like to say that we're all familiar with what happens when we have a new facility like a shopping center or store in our area. Everybody rushes to it when the novelty is there and the newness is. We will see a bump in the use in cannabis January 1st. But I challenge you, has anybody had trouble finding a parking space in Hy-Vee lately? I haven't. When it opened, you couldn't even turn on to go in the parking lot. I believe in allowing and regulating our recreational dispensaries in Bloomington, Normal. This gives us power, and I urge the council to be proactive and think about this seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Zach Gittrich, Kelly Nyson, and then Scott Steinle.
Hello, my name is Zach Gittrich. I'm a longtime fan, first-time stander-upper. I live in Ward 7 on the west side. I wanted to talk about some of the conversations about cannabis. Alderperson Bray stated last week that 70 to 80% of Illinois jurisdictions were opting out of cannabis sales, supporting a more prohibitionist stance. Now, I reached out to her about the source, but I received no response. I can only assume she didn't get my email. I did try and do a bit of research, but I couldn't find that specific statistics that she had mentioned. My hunch is that even if it's true that 70% of counties, towns, villages, however they self-identify, are opting out, if you cross-check this with population, you'd probably find a supermajority of the populace supports ending prohibition, while a minority of the population still supports prohibition, which is pretty much what we've seen in the last several years. That being said, I think it's high time, pun intended, always intend your puns. It's not fair to leave your puns hanging. Bloomington move forward on legalizing cannabis sales. Send this to the Planning Commission and let's get the ball rolling. You have a little over 2 months to get this done. At the same time, I recommend you extend the mandate of the Cannabis Task Force to continue being included in this process. Now, I share Alderperson Milawambe's reticence towards unelected boards and commissions composed of volunteers and or bureaucrats. However, I think in this instance, the Cannabis Task Force has proven itself as a very dedicated group of community members who are willing to look at all sides of the issue, even if they don't necessarily agree with it. In a mere 3 weeks, they performed their due diligence and came back with an extensive report fairly addressing as many concerns as they could. I think it would behoove us to continue their valuable contributions in the zoning process, taxation, and where the taxes should go. Maybe we could have a super-duper task force. I mean, that sounds kind of cool. And while staff will certainly perform their own due diligence, having a dedicated team of volunteers could make it easier and even save resources for city staff. And also, I think for some people, there's just never going to be enough data for them to get on board with this. So anyway, approve cannabis sales and please extend the cannabis task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly, Tyson, and then Scott.
All right. Kelly Tyson from Bloomington. Last week, some members from the council raised concerns about youth if we were to opt in and allow recreational dispensary here in Bloomington. Their concerns were the visibility and availability of cannabis to youth. A separate comment called for all edibles to taste like medicine and no other flavoring, so as not to appeal to youth. I'd like to address those comments here. First, I'd like to point out the availability and visibility of alcohol in Bloomington. There are plenty of liquor stores in Bloomington. There are plenty of bars in Bloomington. Those aren't the only places alcohol is sold or consumed. It's also sold at almost all the gas stations, usually in the same line of coolers where juice and soft drinks are sold. And in restaurants, family restaurants even. If you've ever been to Red Lobster, they have an entire section in their menu with pictures of summer-style cocktails with colors and fruit and umbrellas and tiny plastic swords. And if you're under 21, you can actually still order that drink if you put the word virgin in front of it. An 8-year-old can order a virgin daiquiri. They sell alcohol at grocery stores. There's a whole line of flavored beer made to taste just like pop called Not Your Father's Root Beer, Not Your Mom's Cream Soda, Not Your Mom's Iced Tea, Not Your Mom's Orange Soda. It goes on like this, several more flavors. Hard liquor has all sorts of flavored vodkas and wines that follow suit. They also sell beer and wine at Chuck E. Cheese. Again, not here to demonize alcohol or say that the current restrictions or allowances regarding alcohol are bad. I'm not arguing that cannabis should even have the same visibility. I'm just asking you to consider the hypocrisy of the argument children could be exposed to it and think that it's okay to consume. Therefore, it should not be sold in the community. No one's advocating for additional visibility or marketing of cannabis in any way. No child would even see any recreational cannabis product sold because they would need to be 21 to enter the facility. To be clear, no one is advocating or condoning youth consumption of cannabis. To address the call for medicine-flavored edibles a bit further, I would like to point out that I've taken anti-nausea medication in conjunction with medical cannabis for almost 4 years due to an autoimmune disease. The medication that I take is called Zofran. The specific form I take is dissolvable and tastes like cherries. Doctors have made the discovery that people who have severe stomach issues tend to tolerate medicine better if it doesn't taste horrible. I will also be sending an email to the council with more information to expound upon these points and points I didn't have time for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Steinle. Please, Scott Steinle. Thanks.
Yes, my concern is with the marijuana or the cannabis. The medical portion may have been, I may be able to accept that. We've got people in the medical community, we've got people in the religious community. They're saying it's not a good thing. And who is the council to sit up there and say, well, we think it is? You know, I don't know. Maybe it's time that somebody really listened to the people that know what they're talking about. You know, I mean, if you've got a legal problem, you sure don't go to a physician, I hope. Hope you go to an attorney. The roads, and I know Jim gets tired of hearing this, but the roads are absolutely terrible in this town. There are leaves out on the parkway, or on the street, excuse me, on the street. They're supposed to be on the parkway, and there are so many addresses you can't believe it. And I think everyone on the council got a copy of that because, you know, it cuts it down to a one-lane road indirectly. And there's going to be a car accident, a good one, sooner or later. Now, what's to keep people, and all these sidewalks were supposed to be ADA accessible. If you recall, in 1990, they're all ADA accessible around City Hall, the library, any government building, but they're not ADA accessible in the residential areas. What makes the city thinks that they are not, they're exempt? You know, I don't understand it. I really don't. Now, we've got everybody sitting up there that they're looking at me like, what in the heck are you, what planet do you come off of? You know, I wish you would really, really seriously consider that the sidewalks and the roads and the storm drains be raised. And I know Jim gets tired of hearing this because somebody is really, really going to hurt themselves yet. The other day, somebody was going past. They said, these sidewalks are terrible. I said, don't tell me, tell Jim Karsh. And then they tried the roads, and the roads were worse. They went back to where they came from. One was from Bloomington, a neighbor. The other one was, I don't know where they were from, but they were from Bloomington Normal. And I would think that would really be of concern to you. Regarding this medical cannabis, you know, there is absolutely no excuse for this. It really is not. The only thing you're looking at is the bottom line. And I think I've made my point very clear.
Thank you. Okay, we move right along to the consent agenda. Are there any items that any member of the council would like to have removed for separate consideration from the consent agenda? Councilwoman Carrillo.
Item 7D.
7D. Councilmember Crable.
E, F, G, and K.
Okay, E, F, G, and K. Councilmember Bowen.
H.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the exceptions of item 7D, E, F, G, K, and H?
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. If everyone will go ahead and vote. Okay, the motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. So now we start out, I'm going to do these in the order in which they were pulled. Item 7D, as in dog, and 7D was pulled by Councilmember Carrillo.
Yeah, so I had pulled this at the last meeting, and it was tabled to be brought back this week. My concern was that we ended up going with an out-of-town company when there was a local company that wasn't too far off in terms of the pricing. So I had some questions about whether there had been considerations about, I think the price of the assessment and the price of the actual tests were different. So for one company, one was higher, and then the reverse was true for the other company. So I was curious if that was something that was taken into account when the bid was taken. So I asked those questions to Tim. And then also, we weren't sure whether we were legally bound to go with the lowest bid possible. And so I think Tim did some digging and found some answers for us. So I'll turn it over to him to tell us about that.
All right, thank you. Yes, this was an agenda item on October 14th. Some of the council members had some questions earlier in that day and then raised some questions out of me and just ran out of, no problems with the agenda item, just ran out of time to get the appropriate answers. The first question about did staff consider, some of the pricing that was included in the RFP, and the answer is yes. The recommendation remains the company that is N7D. And then also, we did find out that this was a requirement, was some of the funding that we're receiving, that we do need to take the lowest bid.
Yeah, and I think just to a comment that Tim had made at a previous meeting, I'm going to continue to bring this up and hold us to revisiting how we can maximize the amount of dollars that are being spent locally and going to local contractors versus out of state or out of town. So I hope that we can continue that work.
And actually, one additional comment, we talked about this at staff, where we're going to start including in the memo if the local preference does apply, if we, and highlight some of the local vendors so that it'll be captured in the memo.
Thank you, Tim.
Other questions or a motion?
I move that we approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Craybill. Sorry, if everyone will go ahead and vote. Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We now move to items 7E, F, G, and K, and I'm going to turn to Councilmember Craybill.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is for the fuel contract, both for the cost of fuel as well as the labor, to put it into the different tanks and things in the city. So we spend a lot on fuel each year, and I know that it was mentioned in the agenda description with regard to how we try to use biofuel, which is definitely good. But I think we need to continue to look for ways to reduce our fuel consumption due to the impact of climate change. One of the devices that we've talked about using before, or at least has been mentioned, is idling reduction technology. And I believe in research people have done, the cost for each vehicle is small. We could test on police cars, which are likely the cars that are idling. I know that Jim Karch is looking at information on different idling technologies. And I know that Public Works staff is coordinating with the police department to do an initial review of those technologies and determining feasibility for our fleet. And so I certainly appreciate that. I think that's good for the city, but just wanted to make those comments.
Okay.
And that is accurate. Alderman Crable commented that Jim Karch, Public Works Director, is working with police. Those are the primary users, and that's something that we'll report back every time that we have, a purchase like this that comes before council. We'll also include the process that we've gone through in looking at some of these new technologies or new ways of doing business. So point taken.
I move to approve item 7E.
Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Black. If everyone will go ahead and vote. Motion carries 8-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And then item 7F, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor. On this one, the city's hands were tied. This is dealing with I believe, H&H Landscaping that they went out of business, and so they were doing all the work for a police department and code enforcement with regard to lawns and other things like that need to be cleared. So really nothing that really we could do, and I know that we're looking to do it in staff versus using a vendor in the future, and it looks like that's probably the best option because nobody else really wants to do the work that we can find outside. And I just wanted to get a little bit more information on how we plan to do that permanently and what additional cost, that there may be in doing it internally versus externally.
That's also true. When we tried to look at the Bloomington normal market for anybody that had a landscaping business, and was in the business of mowing, we found little opportunity. Parks did provide for the remainder of this mowing season and for next year. They stepped up and provided the opportunity to fill that gap that was unexpected. We do know that there's going to be a cost to the city, but we think this is the most cost-effective route.
So did you say seasonal employees that will do it in the future?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think actually it's a blend seasonal. There's different situations where we use seasonal for this, and sometimes the full-time employees could also be used. And I think that's an accurate statement. Jay? He's nodding his head yes. So yes.
Great. Therefore, I move to approve item 7G.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Matthey. Everyone will go ahead and vote. Did I?
Still seconding.
He's still seconding. Okay. Okay. Everyone voted. I'm still missing one. Okay, there we go. The motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. We move on then again. I believe you pulled also item 7G. Councilmember Crable?
Thank you, Mayor. This has to do with the proposal to spend $200,000 on chemicals for golf courses, and that was a high number, and that bothered me with regard to how much in chemicals we would likely be putting into our golf courses, and who knows where it goes from there. So I did a little digging. I checked with William Rao, who is an expert on environmental issues. He gave me information on the Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary Program for golf courses, and that is a cooperative that certifies golf courses that meet certain conditions, including the reduced use of chemicals and water. And I spoke with the cooperative today. There's about 800 courses in the United States that have been certified. 200 of those are public courses. Locally, Weibring at ISU is certified, and the Den at Fox Creek from staff learned that they were certified in the early 2000s. That's when we had a certified golf course superintendent for the city. He left the city, and at that point, the certification was allowed to lapse. The cost to certify, at least just the certification itself, is $300 per course. It's unknown really at this point if it would cost more to do everything it would take to be certified, or it would actually cost less or the same if we're saving money on chemicals and water. But I would like, although I'm going to move to approve the agenda item, I would like us to explore what Weibring is doing and potentially what costs there may be. I wouldn't think you would need a certified superintendent necessarily to get this type of certification. So I asked Tim, I talked about this earlier, and I just wondered if I needed to do this in the form of a aldermanic initiative or just something staff can look at. And I'm willing to, if I need to do an initiative, that's fine.
You do not need to do an initiative. Staff is on it.
Right. Thank you.
Is that a motion then?
I move to approve item 7G.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Black. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, just really quick. I'm very supportive of the questions that are being raised around golf and our procurement process. And, as we move into our budget cycle in, probably a few months here, there's going to be a lot of focus on keeping costs down, and we've talked about doing things that increase costs. So I want us to remember this conversation where we are talking about spending more money on some of our things, which is fine. But then I don't want us to be 6 months from now saying, well, why does golf cost more money? Because it's the direction that we have given from a policy level to staff. And if it ends up costing us more to have, more eco-friendly chemicals, not saying that we don't currently, then we'll need to remember this conversation so we know that we are being intellectually honest between now and at that point in time.
Thank you. Councilmember Crable, did you want to?
And I totally agree, with those statements. And like I said, we may be doing a lot of those things already. It may not cost anymore. And I think ultimately you find out what the cost would be, and you do that kind of cost-benefit analysis, and we say, hey, we're spending enough on golf courses. That's not something we're willing to do right now. That's fine.
Okay.
And I guess it would have been back in the day Jim Fruin advocating. I guess it'll be me now. But as I guess the golfer, our golf courses are gems in the community and are really well kept up. I mean, IHSA comes down here and does their tournaments. It's a tourism drive for us. So I always get nervous when we start talking about doing new things, just making sure that the quality is the same from now and down the road. But if we can do it more eco-friendly, why not?
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, we'll go ahead and vote. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk, and you had another item, Councilmember Crable, and that was K.
Yes, Mayor. I've heard some concerns from community members about this establishment having a gaming license, some concern expressed with what they've done in other communities. I don't have specifics on that, but I just wanted to raise those. And I'm not sure, I don't think that's something that has been brought up to the Liquor Commission, or has it even gone before the Liquor?
Well, this is a site plan, but the request has
Right.
come to the Liquor Commission, which is a separate consideration for a liquor license. If they're given a liquor license, until we hit our ceiling of 60 facilities, they, in theory, could have gaming on that site.
Will they be required to come back for the gaming?
This council would have to approve a liquor license. This is just a site plan. Am
Gotcha,
I correct, Mr. Jurgens, if you want to, anything I'm missing?
Okay. I'll move to approve item, I'm sorry, remind me, 7.
K.
K, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Black.
Mayor, I have comments first.
Please.
So I was going to pull this one as well, so thank you, Jeff. This property is great. I would love to see it developed. I think that we've had aspirations to have something there since the Mr. Quicks was torn down 15, 17 years ago now. But this design is treading dangerously close to the gaming parlor model that this council has repeatedly said that it does not want to have anywhere in Bloomington. And I think that a similar property design, where the property was obviously very much designed around having a gaming room, is what started our conversation 18 months ago, when we had a lot of conversations about gaming at that point. So, I'm going to vote yes for this to move forward, but I just am saying out loud that if it comes in front of us with the words "and gaming" as part of the name, I'm going to reject that liquor license, and I will pull that out. We have restaurants and we have bars that happen to have gaming in them, but advertising that your facility is called pizza and gaming, I think, is pushing the envelope a lot further than most of us are comfortable with. So I will vote yes for this today to move forward, but I will not vote for a liquor license that involves that name. So thank you.
Just to clarify again, this is a site plan. There's a separate vote on that. The Liquor Commission did get it. According to, and I'll turn to Jeff, in our liquor code, and we've talked about this before, as a Liquor Commission, we have no particular authority to deny something because we have problems with the name, because there's nothing in our liquor code or ordinances, correct? Not that I'm aware of. Okay, but we do have provisions to stop gaming parlors if they exceed 50% of their revenues, right? Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, Councilmember Painter.
Well, I'll go for this because if Alderman Matthey wants this, it's in his ward, so I will be in agreement with that. But, it is?
Who's Ward 4?
Okay. So, how do you feel about this?
Well, just also to clarify, the Liquor Commission and then our liquor code has no provisions whatsoever for any special designation for any member of the City Council whose ward it happens to be in. If they certainly are free to come in to testify in front of the Liquor Commission as part of the evidence, but we don't necessarily know that that's the case.
Well, okay, let me go further on with this. They said that the reason that gaming would be considered is because they have been an established business. Is that correct?
I think that's true, and including in Decatur, and I believe
Right.
Mr. Gleason has had some interactions. Is that correct, Mr. Gleason, with them back in Decatur?
That's
Yeah.
the reason that they could get a gaming license. Did anybody?
A liquor license. It's a liquor license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then where does the gaming part come in?
The gaming part comes in two ways. One, we do have, the council, of course, does have the two provisions. One is we have a ceiling. We can't have more than 60 licenses.
Right.
And then we have the provision that you cannot have a majority of your receipts come from gaming.
Right.
But
Okay.
other than that, we were considering, especially since nobody spoke against it who lived in the area, we were considering it. Again, this is the site plan only. This is not
Right.
the liquor
Got it,
license, but
got
that's
it.
what we were taking into
So
account.
does the Liquor Commission ever check the invoices against the receipts to make sure that
We have never, first of all, we've never had an issue with that in my 6.5 years. That has been mentioned by Commissioner Jordan, but that wouldn't really apply in a case
So,
like this.
no, you don't.
Because
Yeah.
it would, if somebody's claiming to be a restaurant but they're really a bar, that's when the invoices might matter. Because they may have an incentive to say, hey, I don't really buy this much liquor.
Right.
In this situation, if they're really a gaming parlor, they don't want to minimize their liquor receipts because they're more likely to lose their liquor license. So we haven't really, that was mentioned, but
I was just
yeah.
curious if you ever really have actually checked on these things.
We have not, and
Okay.
what we've done is we've looked to finance, and finance has given us their data and what they pay taxes on, and we haven't had any. We really only had one real situation where somebody who was really operating a bar claimed to be a restaurant, and that institution no longer exists.
Okay.
But we have had a place that in effect was a gaming parlor. It wasn't their invoices, their actual receipts made it quite clear they were a gaming parlor. And I'm not saying that they're not now. They're not statutorily because they're well under 50%, if that helps.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Matthey.
Just for clarity, that stretch of Washington Street, the north side is Ward 4 and the south side is Ward 1, and I have had significant number of people in the Dimmitz Grove neighborhood area reach out to me to ask what's going on and how this got approved. The 500-foot notification district zone doesn't extend. It's weird when you look at it in the map of where it targeted, and most of the area around there is apartments that are more transitive nature. So that's why a lot of people weren't notified and weren't aware this was coming in front of the Liquor Commission, but they've been reaching out to me. So I have heard significant amount from the community that if this is going to be, that the people are going to be watching, if this is going to turn into some sort of a gaming parlor, people are concerned. So,
Right. And that is something that I think that the Liquor Commission would probably want to have the council perhaps reconsider. Maybe we go to 1,000 feet or something like this, so we don't have situations after the evidence that we're dealt, and we take a look at the evidence, and we come up with a recommendation, and then there's sort of ex post facto, the word gets out, and maybe it's 1,000 feet. The clerk is probably
I know that this is about the site plan, but just
Right.
to answer your question, so there's two ways that somebody would, once they had a liquor license qualify, they would have to be open for 12 months, or they could go under the replicated way, which is what we'll see this one come forward with. The other thing is that when they apply, they will have to submit actual financial documents from the business that they're replicating to show that that business has also stayed under the 50%. And then all businesses, when they do a renewal, that's also something that they'll submit to us. So yes, there are other measures to the liquor license that we can do it, but every year when they want to re-up, they have to come forward with their financial documents to show that. And that gaming portion, and just to remind you, will not come back here. That will be approved in my department through the review process that you guys approved.
Councilmember Crable.
Couple of follow-ups. So I thought that, so how are they replicating the license to avoid the 12 months?
So there's two ways. So if you have a previous or an existing business that has been open for 12 months, then they can go through, there's a variety of factors, like 6 factors that they present to us that show that they would be replicating something that's already in existence. One is that their sales have been under 50%. There's a floor plan and kind of all the other things that are laid out. I can't
So where are they now? I mean,
well, this, for instance, Lulu's is what we're talking about, and they're in Champaign and Decatur, I believe.
okay, so yeah, I thought it was something where they were here first, and then they were opening another place or moving.
No.
Okay. Secondly, would it be appropriate, I know we recently passed something on gaming machines, a new ordinance, to have something in there with regard to saying you can't have the name gaming in a business?
We would have to change the ordinance. I'll turn this over to Mr. Juergens, and then would somebody inevitably be grandfathered in if they're already in the pipeline?
But is that something that we have the power to do or wouldn't overstep? Yeah, say you can't have gaming in the name, or something related to gaming in the name.
I'd have to take a look at that.
Okay. Okay. And then this is just out of left field here, but I was seeing some site plans in the agenda, and I know that they call for a certain number of ADA accessible parking spots, and I just wonder, what do we do for compliance, just to look and make sure that they are compliant when they actually finish it?
Katie Simpson, or Bob, we have Bob. Was it on this?
Yeah, I mean, I want to call the question. I mean, this is
No,
almost a...
this is, we're going to do this quickly, but yeah. Let's let Bob answer this question, and we'll move forward.
We evaluate the parking based on the Illinois Accessibility Code, and it's based on the number of parking spaces provided, and no parking lot will have less than one accessible parking space.
Right,
and
but...
I think 17 on this space, so there's probably 1 or 2 required by the code.
Right, but once they get it built, how do we confirm that they actually complied with the requirements?
They have an approved site plan on file, and then if there are complaints related to the number of accessible spaces or the signage that's associated with that, then they could turn that into the state for compliance.
Right, but it's not, we don't do that then as a city to check?
Typically don't.
Okay.
We can reach out to the property owner, but typically we just tell folks to go straight to the state.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, we don't have a motion. Do we have a motion? Oh, we did. Oh, you did. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, at this point, if everyone will go ahead and vote on the motion to approve. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And we have one more, item 7H.
Your mic isn't on.
Oh, yeah, turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
There's no description for the tractor. They're ordering a tractor in addition to that office supply thing that they need. And I was just wondering if the $5,000 is a typo, because I don't know of any tractor that would cost $5,000, and without a visual, I just would like to know.
Okay.
The board approved it.
Uh-huh.
The library board approved this, but I just...
Oh, we have Jeannie about ready to stand up. Jeannie, did you want to come forward?
It is not a typo. It's a tractor that they'll drive around to do snow plowing. So it does cost more because it needs to be able to withstand the weight of snow. So in our past one was under the threshold. I think we put that in the memo. So that's why we didn't budget for it as a fixed asset. But I think costs have just risen.
I'm assuming with the cost of I'm not questioning the cost. It's described as a tractor. No picture was provided. So in my mind, if it costs $5,000, I'm thinking of those little things that have treads with a little shovel that go up and down. What? Bobcat. Okay, Bobcat. Go up and down the sidewalks. That might cost $5,000, but if it's something larger for a parking lot, I would think that it would cost much more, and that's the only question I have.
Okay, it's designed more for the sidewalks, so the library staff takes care of our sidewalks and the main thoroughfare of our parking lot, and then the majority of the parking lot the city does take care of for us with the larger
So
vehicles.
it's a Bobcat that costs $5,000.
I don't know that it's actually a Bobcat, but yes, that's the type of the design.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay. Is there
I move to approve.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and if everyone will go ahead and vote? Okay. Thank you very much. Motion carries 9-0. No nays to announce, Madam Clerk. If we could do things in the future, like if we've got unusual purchases, maybe provide pictures or anything that we can, and that if we have questions, so we don't actually spend the better part of an hour on the consent agenda, that we try to get these questions answered beforehand so that we can deal with the matters that are more substantive. Obviously, if there are questions on the consent agenda, legitimately we want to pull them, of course. But we don't really want this, I don't think, to be common practice At this point, let's move on to our regular agenda, which is item 8A, consideration of approving a professional services agreement in the amount of $49,810 with Lakota Group. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Gleason, who then I think is going to turn it over perhaps to Mr. Mart. And then we have a brief council question and answer period.
Actually, Mayor and Council, we've got Katie Simpson, the
Katie,
city
thank you.
planner, is going to present, but this is one that actually didn't need to be on the regular agenda, but we're celebrating a win. Of the $49,000 that's listed under the description, $30,000 is coming from the Illinois Historic Preservation, bless you. And then also the comments from the chair from the Historic Preservation, Leah Klein, they were spot on. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Katie, welcome.
Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo exactly what Tim said, in June of 2019, City Council adopted a resolution entering into an agreement with the state of Illinois to receive these $30,000 to do the preservation plan. Our portion that was in our grant application was $20,000. We expected the project to be $50,000, maybe more. Sometimes it can be more expensive. After we had that agreement between the council and the state, we went back and did an RFP, request for proposals. We had 3 bids come in. All of them were under $50,000. The Lakota group is the group that we're recommending. It had their proposal addressed everything that we were looking for, extensive public outreach. They had a lot of experience with community preservation planning, so this scale, and also looking at preservation as an economic development tool, not just as a way to keep landmarks, but how can we reuse these properties and make them feasible. And so everything that Tim said, everything that Ms. Klein said earlier, we're recommending in favor of this, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Questions of Ms. Simpson? Councilmember Boland and then Councilmember Emig.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it's, you talk about referring to the comprehensive plan. Is there any way to weave the results from this into the comprehensive plan, or is it going to be a standalone?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question and a great point. So we have a preservation plan right now, but it was adopted in 1983, and so it's not really in our comprehensive plan. It was updated in 2004. The goal would be to bring the goals and recommendations from our comp plan, weave it into the preservation plan, and then when we go back and update our comp plan, we'll have a relevant document that we can then weave back into the comp plan. But we want the two to align. That's a great point.
And the only other question is, will these old plans be some way burned or dissolved? Because the reason I bring that up is that sometimes several plans are referenced to make a decision, and often they conflict and ends up with a not such a good decision. So if they need to be removed with resolution or ordinance, I would like that to be brought forward.
Okay, that's good to know. I think ideally this one would supersede and kind of take the place of the old one, but
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Councilmember Emig.
I definitely would be in favor of getting rid of the old preservation plan, just for the record. I'm really excited about this, so I want to thank you for presenting this and putting this together. I was impressed for a couple of the reasons you mentioned, that I see the connection to the comprehensive plan so clearly in this document, because preservation was a big cornerstone of that, and this will give us a map as to how. I love their community engagement piece. I was really impressed with that, and that looking at preservation as an economic driver. But the other reason why I think this plan is really good and worth supporting is that they also are looking at implementation. So I think often we plan and we don't really move. And I see that this group has a history of not just planning, but engaging in concert with the community and the staff to see that these things can be put into place. So I'm really excited about this.
Thank you very much. Is there A motion? Oh, excuse me, Chris, I'm sorry.
I'd like to move to accept this as presented.
You're ahead of me. Whoa, okay. Moved by Councilmember Painter, second by Councilmember Carrillo.
I have a comment,
Oh,
question.
yes, sure.
So I was just going to add, I mean, I know it was the most expensive bid, and I looked, their plan that they submitted, I think was very good that we had in our agenda packet. I looked at the other two companies on their website, and it didn't seem to have nearly the type of work that we need done. And a couple of things that I thought were good that haven't been mentioned, and if I get to the right PDF here. Let's see. There we go. That they call for a preservation plan steering committee, and I want to make sure that we definitely have a diverse group of people from all parts of the community, and that's kind of what they talk about in the plan that's in the agenda. I guess the concern I have, and then I'll ask a question, is just a note that, and maybe it was a mistake, on page 274 of the packet, it asks, has the company developed a written equal opportunity plan? And I assuming that meant with regard to a diverse workforce, and they said no, which I found odd. But certainly that's not anything that would prevent me from voting for this. So the question I have, though, is could you say a little bit more of, I mean, why do we need, can't we just protect our historic buildings? Why do we need a plan? I mean, just a very basic kind of question.
Yeah, the plan actually kind of guides our decision making. So we can protect all the historic buildings that you would like, but it's a matter of which ones do we protect and why, how can we be strategic about it, what areas. Right now we have 6 neighborhood local districts, 4 of which are on the National Register. There's certain incentives that come with having things on the National Register. In order to do that, we have to do an inventory and an assessment of those properties. And so how do we be efficient with our resources and come up with where we should be spending that time? You know, for example, the warehouse district, for example. There's a lot of old buildings there. None of them are on the National Register right now. None of them have local designation. Our current historic preservation plan doesn't really address how to make them vital again. And so having the plan that kind of guides our policy, that can help council decide if you want to allocate resources to doing a National Register district nomination, which makes it eligible for state tax credits, or things like that to help guide our decisions. And then having the public input piece too, I think is important, because we are talking about property, and these are assets for the future of Bloomington, not just, we have to balance that. So.
Great explanation. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks. Okay, at this point, we'll go ahead and vote. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. And we move right along to item 7B, and that's consideration and action on an intergovernmental agreement with the Department of Health Care and Family Services to participate in a federal program to receive supplemental Medicaid payments to ground emergency medical transports as requested by the fire department. And we have a brief presentation and a brief council discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to call, there he is, Fire Chief Moore to the podium. But this is actually an interesting topic, something that Brian and his staff have run the lead on. The Illinois Fire Chiefs Association is partnering with the Department of Human Services at the state level. And the opportunity here is to collect a portion of the uncollected amount for ambulance rides, basically. It's an area that we do not receive reimbursement from Medicaid, and it's a cost, but it's one that we accept to provide this service to our community. This is one that throughout the United States you see, the concern, the lack of funding for municipalities growing, and this is an area that the chief has seen a nationwide trend and he's trying to get us on board and asks for the approval from council on the MOU, or the IGA. Chief?
Thank you, City Manager Gleason. Thank you, Council and Mayor. So tonight I'm here seeking the approval to enter into this intergovernment agreement with the Department of Health Care and Family Services. Basically, this is called the GMET program, or Ground Emergency Medical Transport. The Department of Health Care and Family Services is the Illinois department that manages the Medicaid payments through the state of Illinois. This newly proposed plan will help provide a supplemental payment that will help offset that cost to provide the transport service to Medicaid patients. Currently, there are several states that are already participating in plans similar to this, states such as Missouri, Iowa, Colorado, Florida, and Massachusetts. Illinois' plan has been modeled after Massachusetts and Florida's plan. The Department of Health Care and Family Services anticipate that this plan will be approved by the end of this year. So again, the plan is proposed, but not yet approved. They don't believe there's any reason why this plan will not be approved. Just to put it in context, last year, Medicaid ambulance transports made up 34% of our ambulance transports. Illinois Medicaid payments cover approximately 10% of the cost to provide that service. So this program could be very instrumental in helping us recover some of those costs. The fire department is required to submit an annual cost report to the Department of Health Care and Family Services along with this intergovernment agreement. They're trying to get departments to participate in this so that they can start to acquire the data that they need to decide how much those supplemental payments will be. And those, our costs will be looked at regionally, so there'll be like an average that comes up with what that payment will be. So currently, they're talking about this program being administered quarterly. So although our fee-for-service will receive that additional supplemental payment with the bill, however, managed care organization payments will be done on a quarterly basis. And the Department of Health Care and Family Services will send us a bill on a quarterly basis where we have to fund 50% of that money that we receive back. And that 50% is going to go to the Department of Health Care and Family Services for administration costs, and it will also be rolled into future Medicaid payments. By entering into this IGA by November 1st will allow us to be eligible by starting January of 2020. So I think at this time it'd be best if I just entertain any questions that you might have. Questions of Chief Moore? Wow. You were so, excuse me, I'm sorry. Council Member Bray.
I just wanted to thank the Chief for shepherding this effort and for the forward thinking that's reflected here by entering into this intergovernment agreement. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we give authority to Chief Moore and staff to enter into the intergovernment agreement as proposed.
Thank you. Motion made by Councilmember, Seconder-in-Chief, Councilmember Milawambwe. Further questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, if everyone will go ahead and vote. Motion carries 9-0. There are no nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your help. Thanks. We move to our last regular item, item 8C, and this is consideration of an action on a resolution to initiating a text amendment to the City of Bloomington Zoning Code, Chapter 44, to allow adult use cannabis business establishments in the City of Bloomington as requested by the Community Development Department. Let me just clarify, since we had quite a few people commenting in public comment, this is a very narrow vote by very narrow charge. This is not whether to opt in, opt out. It was something that seemed to be unanimously agreed to by the council in the last meeting, and that was to move ahead with the zoning process if we moved in that direction. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Gleason?
You stole exactly what I was going to say.
Because we're not here to debate that. We're really not here to go and re-question whatever the state law it was. We're here to act on whether to move ahead with the zoning process.
That is true. Where the discussion goes with council, I have no control over that, but Jeff Juergens, corporate counsel, has a 4-slide PowerPoint to explain exactly what we are doing. And I do agree and directed staff that, on this topic, felt confident that we had a majority vote to at least bring this forward as a council item, and we're going to explain what this is and what this is not.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council, and you guys basically took care of my first slide, which is this is just the formal process under our zoning code. The first step in doing a text amendment is to initiate it, and you do that by resolution or motion. We have a resolution in front of you tonight. If it is approved, then there would be a hearing in front of the Planning Commission on November 13th. The impact of this, this is, as was just stated, simply moving the item forward to the Planning Commission. If you vote for this, it doesn't mean that you have to vote for the ultimate amendment to it. Rather, it's showing support for it to go through the process and have the Planning Commission take a look at it and come back with a recommendation. Just a couple of key provisions that's in the text amendment. We followed a similar process than what we've done with other text amendments in the past, including the comprehensive zoning overhaul that we did last October in 2018, where we actually have a sample text amendment attached as an exhibit to the resolution. So you see that in the packet tonight. It's basically a starting point. We understand that the council might change it, that it might have some changes through the Planning Commission process, through the public hearing process. Once it even goes through that, you might have some additional changes to it. But this is a starting point based on the IML model ordinance, reviewing other ordinances that communities throughout the state are doing, other kind of feedback, best practices, those types of things. So a couple of key provisions that you see in this text amendment is that it's all designed, any use would be by special use. So that would require, if somebody wants to start a business establishment, that they would have to go and get a special use. That would require a public hearing through the Zoning Board of Appeals and then ultimately approval by this council. So any type of business, and there's the 4 or 5 different business establishments, would have to go through that process. All business establishments would have to be 500 feet from the property line of schools, churches, playgrounds, those types of things. We also have a requirement that it would be at least 250 feet from the property line of any residentially zoned district. So, you see these types of restrictions in a lot of these ordinances that communities are approving. So those are what we have in this potential draft amendment. We also have in this amendment that on-site consumption or use would be prohibited. This is certainly something that either, obviously can be changed now. It also can be changed in the future. But as a starting point, we have it as something that would be prohibited. There are various security measures within the provisions. Advertising is linked to the act. There are specific provisions for both of these in the Cannabis Control Act. For example, advertising, you can't have cartoon characters. You can't have advertising that's designed toward minors. You're going to see pretty signs and things like this are going to be pretty plain and generic. We link that into the special use provisions because if there were to be a violation of that, then we could go after the special use permit and not necessarily rely on the state going after their licensing. So some of these things have been incorporated into the special use process, even though it's also required at the state level. We have kind of component factors for, in addition to all the other special use requirements that somebody has to go through. If you're going to have a cannabis business establishment, there are some other factors that you look at to decide whether or not they're going to get the special use. One of them is the number of other existing cannabis businesses that are already in operation. So, if you're looking at a proliferation, or if there's a decision that there are too many establishments within the community, that is a factor that could be considered, and the impact on those establishments. Also, the impact the proposed establishment would have on existing or planned uses within the vicinity of the subject property. So, for example, if somebody is planning to put one, right next door to, maybe it's not a church or, falls within the definition of a school, but maybe it's a similar type use, that is something that could be considered when deciding on the special use. Just generally the timeline, if the council were to vote on to initiate this process tonight, as I said, this would go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing on November 13th. Notice of that will actually be in the newspaper tomorrow because we had to make that deadline. That could be one public hearing, though. It could be continued if they need to have multiple public hearings on it. If it were to be wrapped up in time, then potentially the council could vote on that at one of the meetings in December. We could take up some of those issues. There's really only kind of a self-imposed deadline here, and that's kind of up to the council to decide if you want to have zoning in place. If you want to allow it and you want to have zoning in place by the end of the year, this is, kind of the schedule to do that. But again, that's kind of a self-imposed deadline if you want that. We will be taking up, potentially other cannabis items in relation to updating the misdemeanor provisions of our city code that really don't have anything to do with zoning or businesses, but more on the violations for having, over, so many grams of cannabis and those things. That's a separate process. That'll come separate, but also before the end of the year. I went through that pretty quick, but again, would reiterate, this is really just kind of a starting point. As I think we said in the council memo, a conversation starter for the council, for the planning commission to start this through the process, if that's what's desired.
So if this were approved, which is our narrow charge for this evening, planning commission would start its first hearing, might have subsequent hearings, but that would start on November 13th.
That is correct.
Okay. Start our council discussion questions. Councilmember Bray.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you for putting this together, Jeff. And just a few questions about the certainties and uncertainties in this space. Staff has taken the time to put together what turned out to be a kind of a large resolution because it addresses the entire cannabis industry, all the pieces that are both the craft growers, or the many list of items, the craft grower, the cultivation center, the dispensing organization, the infuser organization, the processing, the transporting, and of course then there would be the distribution center, which is called here a cannabis business establishment. As a home rule jurisdiction, do we have the right currently under the Illinois statute to opt into only one in this list or two in this list and then opt out of the rest, or is it in for a penny, in for a pound?
It would be my opinion that we can regulate or zone these differently, and yes, that you could allow some types of establishments and not other types of establishments. That would be my opinion at this point.
So thank you for that. So if we had a collective consensus here that we had some interest in exploring certain kinds of businesses for our community for now, but other businesses later, would we be able to, so if we said we wanted to, let's say, stay in to do a distribution center, but opt out of a cultivation center, could we later go back and revisit the cultivation center opt out?
Yes. So if you, for example, if you opt out on some business establishments now, then certainly you can, go back through the same process and zone those and approve those, repeal your prohibition ordinance, those types of things. It's really, and again, this has not been tested by any communities yet,
Right.
but based on my read, my understanding of the law at this point, that you would be allowed to do those types of things as a home rule community.
Thank you. And I've heard some things in the legal community and actually have talked to Senator Barackman about this issue, about what's happening with that trailer bill. And as of the end of last week, I heard the trailer bill will be pushed into the next legislative session rather than appear in the November session. Are you hearing similar?
I have not. The last I heard was they were looking at purely technical changes, but I don't have any other information, any updated information on that.
Yeah, and when we get to discussion part, I want to share the discussions I've had.
Well,
on
this is our
piece.
the discussion.
This is question part. Yeah.
Question discussion. I mean, this is it because
You want me to go ahead and share?
even these are really not relevant to what we're dealing with tonight, right? Because we're just talking about starting the zoning process.
Yeah, so this has to go to zoning because
Right.
it has to do with what are our powers
Right.
as the
Right.
city to zone and pick and choose which of these businesses fit our community, if any, and then which that we would reject. And we're looking at asking our planning commission to take on a whole list of things that I'm not sure at this juncture that this body has an appetite to jump in to all these businesses. Maybe we want to only send to planning commission one or two to map out for us and take an incremental approach as we look at both our zoning and what these propositions, are of this emerging business. There's a lot to be learned in this space. There's an awful lot we don't know. And while, we've received some information from our one citizen group, we have other groups to yet hear from. And so I would just, again, say that, I think maybe we might want to just, I'm interested to hear what other folks think about that, but I really would like to kind of introduce the concept that maybe we pick 2 to send over to zoning and have those come back, and then again, adopting an incrementalism approach, over the next 12 months, 24 months, then take these in turn. And this way we can be intentional with what we're doing, and we can learn from what other cities and towns are doing around this. But I'd like to hear what other folks think about that, and
Okay. The Councilmember Carrillo, and then Councilmember Craybill, and Milawamble.
A couple of questions for Jeff. So one, is there any way that we can pull up the zoning map, like to visualize where these areas would be? It's coming. Okay, great. And I would like to put in the request that Normal has one, and we can have nice things too. So I would like for us to have one for our residents to look at, like if this proposal were adopted as is, then like what would that look like in terms of areas that
You mean like on a website or something that they can go
yeah,
look at?
yeah. I mean, I know somebody sent me a map of like Normal, and there were just like they had color the places in the community where potentially a cannabis business establishment could establish based on what they moved to their zoning board.
So these are the, this is kind of the initial work by city staff, and specifically the planner, Katie Simpson. Shows a few of the districts, or the districts that these types of establishments would be allowed in. Now, this doesn't take into account, the 250-foot requirement to be away from residential, or the 500-foot, from a school or a church or something like that. But this
So
does...
it would be fewer than this. This
Yes,
is just the
right,
max.
exactly. Yes.
And then I'm not as young as I used to be, so can you just tell me color-wise, what does I see a lot of red. What's the red mean?
The red is various commercial districts.
Where it may be possible?
Anything that you see colored up there is yes.
Okay.
And staff did a zoning matrix on this, and so we actually, I think, have a map for each different type of business establishment, because there might be some types of businesses that are better for agricultural than, for your downtown district. So not all businesses are the same, but this is, this is all of the different types of districts that would allow some type of business establishment.
So again, just to reiterate, this doesn't include the restrictions based on proximity to schools, churches.
Correct.
That sort of thing. Got it. My next question is, somebody mentioned during public comment that we sort of lose home rule by moving ahead with this, but based on my understanding of what you just presented, actually doing this via special use does allow us to pull a permit if there is misuse of that permit. Is that accurate, or is that a legal gray area?
So if there was a violation of the special use permit, then that is correct. We would go in and argue that those conditions are violated and pull that use, and argue that the business operations should cease.
So we're not ceding that power to the
I guess it depends on what's meant by that, but the licensing of these establishments is left to the state.
Sure.
So any power that the council wants to have, if it's going to allow these establishments, and it wants to have some sort of some sort of control, is going to be through that special use process. And so that's why some of the things, like I talked about, we've put in there, tying some of those things, like the advertising, the location restrictions, those types of the security. We have things in there about, your garbage has to be in secure facilities, different things like that would also be part of that special use permit.
Got it. And then my last sort of set of questions is about on-premises use.
So I did see that, we decided to go with the IML language that prohibits it. Did we look into any other possibilities? I guess my concern is making prohibition the default, or I guess in the reverse, making approval of on-premises use the default. Like, I don't know, is there some way that we can tell the zoning commission that they should look at on-premises use without setting a standard, like a default of, yes, we're allowing or disallowing?
I would say that's really completely up to the council as to, what you want to do. I mean, you can send, messages, or we can tell the planning commission there were council members that want to look at this aspect or that aspect. So we can really approach it however this council wants to approach it. But, again, as you said, we kind of followed the IML, model for that. And again, I would just say it's really up to the council how you want to proceed on that.
I guess, yeah, my concern about it, as we've had conversations about how polarizing the issue can be, is that, like, if this text says we're not allowing it, then I think what we'll see is like an outpouring from the community who's going to say, allow it, allow it, allow it, right? And if we flip it, and if it's like we are allowing it, then we're going to see an outpouring of people who are saying, don't allow this, don't allow this. So I'd just like for us to maybe consider a more neutral way of making sure that this gets covered so that we don't miss the nuance because people feel like they're reacting to something that we're already putting forward. So like if other folks around the table have an interest in that, I would like to see us consider some neutral language. And then I guess just a couple of clarifying questions. So is the zoning board able to recommend something different than the text amendment that we've provided them? So like, can they come back with a recommendation
Yes.
of something totally, okay.
Yes.
And then are we bound by the recommendation from the zoning board?
No, you would not be bound by it.
So we could do something completely different than what they come, I mean, it wouldn't be very good politics, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
I look over to the planner, but yeah, that does happen from time to time.
So just to clarify, the council could give direction up front or let the zoning process work. I think when we had no objections, when we talked about drafting this for this evening, it was sort of generic and let the zoning process, or excuse me, the planning zoning process run its course, and then we would react. But we could give instructions up front or react after the fact. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. We'll move to Alderman Craybill, and then
my fellow council members may have had their light on before me.
no, I'm calling you in the order in which I saw you. Okay. So Alderman Craybill, Milawambwe, and Painter.
All right, thank you. So just to be clear, is this going to zoning or planning?
This is so text amendments go to the planning commission.
Okay.
Sorry.
However, if it is say a special use, it ultimately does become a special use.
Yeah.
Special uses go through the zoning board of appeals.
Right, after.
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Okay, just want to make that clear. And then, let's see. Oh, on the map here, I mean, we could conceivably limit it much more than what has been proposed, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The act allows you to limit up to prohibit locations. So
And we can also change the feet distance for schools and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay. And then I was a little unclear on the timeline, so I know that potentially there would be public comment in front of the Plan Commission on November 13th, but then the Planning Commission needs to vote, right? So when would that be?
It could be on the same date. So typically the public hearing, you'll start that, and you'll have people who will provide testimony, people who will want to provide comment on the text amendment. I think there will probably be some sort of a staff presentation. The Planning Commission members will then debate, talk about the various aspects of it, and they could, if they're ready, they could vote at that meeting, or if they need more time or if they have questions, it could be continued to another meeting.
Okay. And just to reiterate, whatever is sent to them with regard to the draft ordinance, they can change it, they can make different recommendations, whole cloth, if that's what they choose to do.
That's right, and I'm actually trying to pull that provision up because I don't want to tell you wrong, specifically on once they recommend that to the city council,
sometimes there are provisions that say you can reject and send it back. Sometimes there are provisions saying you can change it. So I'm going to pull that up as we're talking here, but generally, yes, that they will take a look at this. They may make recommendations that, certain businesses be in different districts, and that's really what the process is supposed to do. They're the ones that are supposed to be the experts, looking at that ground level as to what the restrictions should be in the best interest of the city, that type of thing.
I'm going to move to Councilmember Milawambwe because we are running out of time.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm going to rush. Thank you. So Jeff, thank you very much for clarifying what the resolution is or is that, because from my glancing at the room, it seems like some might have thought that today is a day that we're actually voting to allow it or not. So this is just starting the process. I definitely appreciate that. There's a couple of things that I've said before, I'm very interested in the revenue implications for the city, so for us to explore that. So to that extent, going back to something that the mayor said, I think it would be, in the interest of time, it would be wise for us to make sure that certain topics are covered during the Planning Commission hearing. And on the subject of the Planning Commission hearing, I'm a little concerned that, it looks like we're moving in the direction of allowing probably more discussion, so it's not just one meeting, because I do feel like for something that is, for one, the legislation is so large, I think, and it's taken so much time to develop, I do think that we should be taking a little bit more time to fully explore what that means for us, because, anywhere you turn, when you ask a question, people say, I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't know what other cities are doing. So I think we definitely need to take a little bit more time in terms of the Planning Commission hearing.
Okay. Thank you very much. And at this point, since we've got a couple people who still want to speak, can we have a motion? This really is supposed to be a very narrow discussion of whether or not we just move ahead with the planning, process, and that's what we unanimously agreed on last week. But can I have a motion to extend our time because we've expended by 10 minutes? Moved by Councilmember Boland, second by Councilmember Carrillo. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? Oh, what did I say? Oh, Crable, I'm sorry. Yes. Fees, sorry.
Councilmember Mathy?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin? Yes. Councilmember Mwambwe?
Say yes. Yeah.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo?
Yes.
Councilmember Black? Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got another 10 minutes. All right. Let's see.
I'm next.
You're next. Sorry. That's right. I did notice you next to you. I have your name down here, but my pen doesn't write.
Okay, thanks. I just have a comment that I think whatever we do moving forward, we need to look at what Normal does and sort of do it in a partnership with them, because we're one community and we have several colleges, and I think that it would be really to our benefit to make sure that we work together on this. And secondly, I think that as long as we are going through this whole zoning process, we should do it for everything, including craft growers and everything like that. Just because if we're really looking at the revenue aspect of it, the only way we're going to make good money on this is if we grow it and export it to other places. So I think that that should be an important consideration, and I personally think that we should look at that as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to echo all of what Councilmember Painter said. At this point, Councilmember Boland, Mathy, and Black.
I have a question, several questions. What is a GAP zone? It says business, but what does the GAP stand for?
Gridley Allen Prickett.
Gridley Allen Pickett.
What does that?
It's form-based code. Yeah.
Form-based code?
Yeah, they decide they wanted it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, there is a clause or whatever, a spirit of the law that is related to social justice, and I also have been attending all the Connect Transit meetings, and they talk about having bus service for the purpose of economic development. So I would suggest or maybe ask that at least dispensaries be along a bus route or easily accessible by a bus route, because everybody should be able to, that want it, if it's legal, should be able to access it, and for people that maybe want to work there should be able to access it. I don't know if that can be put in the zoning.
Well, and that's something that we can decide once they've done their work.
Well, I mean, I just
Yeah.
want to throw
Yeah.
that out there.
Right.
Yeah, we'd have to probably,
And it's part of the public record, not so much to Mr. Juergens,
Yeah,
but to
we-
the public record. Now that you've
we can do research and look at that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Guess. Oh, yeah. The only other thing, and this is pretty much for the public record, too, zoning meetings are at 4 o'clock. The majority of people in this community are at work. From my experience at attending zoning meetings, very few people attend to voice their opinion. My concern is that we will not get very much feedback. The consensus that I have gotten, both pro and con, bottom line is not in my backyard. So public record, I wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Matthey.
So Johnny and Donna stole two of the things I want to talk about. One was that we need to make sure that we work in partnership with the town, because every time we do something different than them, we keep drawing barriers and it exacerbates problems. And then the second one Donna said was working with Connect Transit on this. We know that the earlier Connect Transit gets involved in any development project, the better the outcome is for people that might want to work there. I did have a question, though, is how do mixed-use buildings work? For instance, if there's retail on the first floor and there's apartments above that, I mean, I think those are technically all zoned as business districts, so...
That's right, and Katie can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but for purposes of this, that would not be treated as residential if it's actually in a business district. Am I correct? So, and I think the thought process behind that is if somebody's living in, that type of a zone district, then and there's already commercial, establishments around them that there would not be that distinction. So it would not be considered a residential zone property.
Okay. And then just one last comment is when we're drawing the maps of potential locations, and I think the default is 500 feet from schools and churches, I would appreciate if it's not a ridiculous amount of work to also see what 750 or 1,000 feet maps look like at the same time, so that we can kind of make some differentiation there. I don't know how much work that is, but I think that'd just be good information to have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alderman Black, haven't heard from you yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. It's everybody's favorite topic. Yeah, so I want to revisit something you said earlier about the process in that, so zoning and planning or we'll just say planning is going to take a look at this and do some zoning recommendations around a special use permit, which I totally support. Could we, if let's say they look at all half dozen or so different categories, could we just pick and choose at that point in time which ones we want to enact, or do we need to make that decision at this point in time?
Well, I don't think you need to make that decision tonight. Are you talking about eventually when they...
Yeah, so like we talked about the growers, and we talked about...
Right.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately they will come up with a recommendation. And actually looking at the code language on this, it says that the council can then grant or deny.
their recommendation. So I think the only other option there would be to remand it back for further consideration. So for example, if they make a recommendation to you, and let's say that their recommendation is to, also prohibit any business in the, the ag districts, and this council was very concerned about that, I think you could probably remand it back and say, we want you to take another look at this component of it. And then they would, and maybe ultimately say, okay, we recommend it now to include ag districts.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like that would functionally be an opt-out for that component until it got remanded and sent back through the process at that point in
If
time.
you approve the remaining portion.
Because that would be in December, so there wouldn't be sufficient time to do a public hearing
That's right.
and do that process over. Okay. So from at a higher level here, when I'm looking at this map, this is very helpful, and anything we can do that makes this not look like it's a colorblind test, I would appreciate. So I see, I've heard a lot of feedback from folks. Ward 7 has a lot of area that's lit up right now. Some of it is like a block or two from my house, and that's part of what I would envision
Are you
here.
suggesting it's good or bad?
It does not bother me because I look at it like this, that if we have a special use permitting process in place and the neighborhood gets to weigh in and there's no concern from the neighborhood, then why should I have a concern? And as a resident, if somebody were to put a dispensary near my home, I'd have some questions about what the security looks like, what the process looks like. I'd weigh in on that through the zoning board of appeals, and then hopefully my concerns, if any, would be heard and go from there. I think what I'm hearing a lot is that there's uncertainty with the state law. There's still some pieces that are up in the air. But from where I sit, we have to make the decision with the best information we have at the time. And what I'm hearing from you, Jeff, is that if in the example I'm giving, a dispensary opens near my house and there are problems that are documented with, say people consuming in the parking lot and gets called in, gets verified, we pull their permit, we could end their operations after their due process. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we would go after the special use permit that was granted to them to allow them to operate that business.
Yeah. And so, and I've also heard a lot about, some of the growing cultivation centers and some of the issues around, like, the odors that come from them and, what that looks like. All of that process could be encapsulated during a ZBA conversation, and the neighbors could weigh in or not weigh in or whatever their thoughts, and then we'd ultimately make that determination, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So to Kim's point from earlier, you'd asked for some feedback about looking at these half dozen or so different types of definitions. I think from where I sit, there's probably only one or two that I'm interested in pursuing, but I'd like to get the ZBA or the Planning Commission to take a look and provide some feedback on all of them at this point. And then, we've talked about this before and kind of echoing the concerns from Donna and Jamie that I'd like to hear from our intergovernmental partners. I'd like to hear from Wesleyan. If we reach out and ask for some written feedback about our zoning requirements, what they think, and if they don't think anything, they don't think anything. But I think it's really important with this kind of seismic shift that we get feedback from those in the community that are our stakeholders and get that on the record and include that as part of our final decision as opposed to just kind of one-off conversations. Let's do it formally. And to Jen's point from earlier, I'm not really interested in on-site consumption at this point. That's something I'd be interested in revisiting down the road if we go down that path, but that's not something I want to pursue at this point in time.
Okay, we're once again out of time, and I do want to reiterate what Alderman Black has said. We're talking about, as we did in the last meeting, unanimously, just to begin the process, the planning process, where we would get all of this information. And so I'm going to ask a last time, but at this point I'm going to say 5 minutes. Remember, we're not making any decisions other than to start the planning process. This is, as I forgot who said it, this is everybody's favorite topic. But we got to cut bait on this one. And we're not going to make any real decisions other than starting the planning process that everybody seemed to agree on in the last meeting. So can I have one last motion for 5 more minutes? 5 minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carrillo. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Craybill. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey?
Yep.
Councilmember Bolin? Councilmember Mulongwe?
A reluctant yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin? Or, I'm sorry, Painter?
Yes.
Sorry. Councilmember Correa?
Yes.
Councilmember Black? Councilmember Crable?
Yes.
Councilmember Bray?
Okay. All right. At this point, in the order that I noticed people, and everybody has spoken once, so I'm just reminding you, if we can be as succinct as possible, members Carrillo, Bray, and Craybill.
Yeah, I guess maybe just a clarifying question for Scott. So when you say that you're not interested in the considering on-premises use, you mean as part of this, like you don't want to see it in this proposal? I just want to clarify what that means. Or that's just not something that you, like even if the zoning board came back and recommended it, you would not be supportive of it? Or are you just saying you're not supportive of amending the language today?
I would not be supportive of it, even if it came back as a recommendation from zoning.
Understood.
Okay. Councilmember Bray.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing up that point. And I would echo Alderman Black's comments on on-site consumption. I would not be supportive of that now or at any time. So, Jeff, a quick question. You were asked about the process and how we would try to exercise control over these locations, and if there was a bad actor or bad things were happening at a particular location, some of the activities that we would take and the like. Could the business file suit against the city for taking that action?
Well, so we don't usually go in under special uses. We haven't in my tenure for somebody violating that, but that would actually be an action that's initiated by the city. And somebody's taking this special use, they know the conditions. It's part of the whole process. So, you know, it's something that's going to be initiated by the city. I don't know what any kind of counterclaim would be. They might argue, well, we're not violating this, but a court's ultimately going to decide, are they violating this condition or are they not, and, you know, is the special use, you know, going to be subject to revocation or not?
I see. So if there's the bad actor and bad things are happening, unlike alcohol, with cannabis, we would have to file suit. We couldn't immediately take action and pull the license, as the mayor was talking
We'd have
about
to,
before.
we can review that process and let you know what the specific, you know, requirements would be. It probably, and I hate to even speculate, probably starts with a city-initiated process, but my guess is eventually it ends up in some sort of a court process.
In a court process.
Yeah.
And so we all know litigation can be expensive, and as a good steward of the monies that are entrusted to us, I again think that we need to bring our due diligence to bear. While there are those in the community that are very bullish for these opportunities, I'll tell you that I represent a ward that is not bullish for this opportunity, and there are many, many people who have grave concerns from various walks of life. When you take a look at this map, there's this, I'll kind of echo what Alderman Boland has said, there's this idea of not in my backyard, right? Yet some folks say, well, just park it out of the edge of town. Well, when you look at the edge of town, and I'll just show you all Ward 9, is up here in the far right corner, we have executive homes, which we have a very high assessed value, and we benefit from the taxes those folks pay, the property taxes that they pay. If an ag operation sets up out there that has these bad odors and the processing odors, there are statistics out there for current estates that have recreational operations that the values of those properties drop. And so if we step into this and have someone set up some kind of an ag business or some kind of a manufacturing or processing business, and we have these odors permeating our community, then we could potentially be prejudicing really our tax base because of it's almost like some kind of a financial whim, if you will, because this value proposition is not yet proved out. So what I would say is that I think our due diligence requires us just to go slowly. I've heard here that folks are supportive of the distribution. Some folks are supportive of the distribution centers, the sales centers, and the craft centers, but I don't know that anyone is supportive of the ag centers and the processing centers necessarily. We've not really taken any testimony or received any information.
We aren't making that decision tonight.
But before we put the efforts of our citizens to work on trying to zone out something that may be something for which we have no appetite, I would make a recommendation and actually make a motion that we amend this proposed referral over to the Planning Commission, and we just ask them to go to work on two pieces, one being the adult use cannabis business establishment, and the second one being the adult use cannabis craft grower. By doing this, I think we'll show our stewardship and our due diligence. We'll ask them to take a look at those two things. In the meantime, we can bring people in to talk to us about not only these kinds of businesses, but then the other businesses. We also have the opportunity then to get something back come session from the legislators to understand a little bit more about our power in this space and make sure that we're protecting what we already have in community and not giving up the valuable community that we have in favor of the unknown.
So are you making a substitute motion? Is that what you're making right now?
Yes, I
Because
am.
we are out of time, but we're
I
going
am.
to go with this.
I'm
Okay.
making a motion that we revise this referral
And
over
only include?
the two
Craft
two
grower and dispensing organization. The cannabis business establishment actually includes all of those, so I think you're wanting to
You want to
just
narrow
allow
the charge then of the zoning board?
just
Yeah.
craft
Planning
growers
Commission.
and dispensers.
Exactly, and get that kind of information, and then potentially, and then we'll have the information back, and we'll come back to a vote at the end of the year, and if it's, the majority says go with that, then you're going to
Okay,
roll that
okay.
out, and then you go forward with
just
the other
because we're-
businesses later.
Okay, we
And
do have a
again,
motion. I'm going to ask, is there a second? Because we're out of time. A second on this. If everyone will go ahead and vote on the substitute motion at this point. Okay. The motion fails 7-2. There are 7 nays to announce, Madam Clerk. Please.
Councilmember Massey, Councilmember Milawambwe, Councilmember Emig, Councilmember Painter, Councilmember Carrillo, Councilmember Black, Councilmember Crable.
Okay, thank you very much. And at this point, you two, you have your lights on. You're asking me to call the question, but you have your light on.
That's what I want to do. I want to call the question.
Okay.
I want to make a motion that we approve as presented.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, second by Councilmember Mathey. If we'll go ahead and vote on this is only to send it to the Planning Commission. Okay. Okay. Motion carries 7-2. There are 2 nays to announce, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Bolin, Councilmember Bray.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we're finished with that. And thank you all, staff, for everything you do. Mr. Gleason? No.
City manager comments. It is the last meeting of the month. I've got Finance Director Scott Rathbun that's going to present the monthly Finance Director's report. And I got a couple of comments after he's done.
Thank you, sir. It's been a long evening, so I'll move quickly. Trends are still positive, but I wanted to highlight, is there a mouse here? I've added a column for context off to the right here, the FY19 budget. We do have information that highlights the year over year, but I'm discussing our 20 variance to budget. It might be helpful to keep in mind where we were for 2019. For example, local use tax is $79,000 better than budget year to date through 5 months, but you can see that we took the budget up to 2,350 from 1.9, so we increased the budget by $450,000. So a $79,000 budget variance for the year, that's still a good number, but when you put that in the context of what we were budgeted at last year, it's a very good statistic. So obviously I've talked about that a lot. That's the online sales tax legislation that went into effect. That's going to ramp up next July to include local taxes. We want to be conservative going into the budget on that line, but that number should keep improving as we move along. Moving back to the prior year-to-date variance column, Scott Sprouse told me to do this so they can see it online. We only have 2 categories that are under from prior year comparison. Home rule, you're talking about a budget of $23 million, so being $100,000 under the prior year is, I hesitate to say immaterial, but that could change in 1 month. And then utility tax, significant decrease over the prior year. Once again, as I've mentioned previously, that's all telecom. Going down the 2020 budget variances, food and beverage continues to do very well, $137,000. We took that budget up slightly year over year, $4.3 million versus $4.23. So people are going out and enjoying themselves. I view that as a good attitude towards the economy, which is reflected in our income tax and our replacement tax numbers being over budget. The other line I wanted to highlight tonight is the hotel and motel tax. I rarely talk about this. We actually took that budget down year over year. That category has been somewhat declining. We took it down $100,000, yet it's $49,000 better than budget, $30,000 over prior year. So I think that's starting to flatten out for us a little bit. Hopefully we won't see any more decreases on that. The general fund income statement. I wanted to highlight these variance notes that I've added over here. Most of these are based on a comparison to prior year. I'm going to start updating this projected column next month. We'll be 6 months in. We'll have some good data at that point where we can start projecting trends. Two things to highlight tonight. The licenses category, you can see that we're 177, 178 year to date versus $93,000 last year. That's due to the video gaming terminal fees that were new for 2020. So we budgeted $125,000. It came in about $123,500, a little under, but that's a material difference there. The benefits line, our trend, remember annualized trend, we're 5 months through the year, so that's 42%. If we straight lined every category, we'd be exactly 42% through each category. Well, we're seasonal, we're cyclical in the city. Benefits and salaries can go up and down, but benefits you can see is over 42%. Salaries is under. So the deviation there is related really to the incentive we put into place, the cutoff for the retirement and taking advantage of the sick leave buyback. We have about $300,000 added to the costs related to that so far. The deadline, as everyone knows, is October 31st, so next month we should have more information on how that is all going to play out, and that's part of the reason I wanted to wait to do the projections. Enterprise funds. I've updated some data points on this worksheet. I put in the beginning fund balance for the year. So we've got the current year activity. I was asked about the negatives, the reds. So I want to highlight water. $28 million, $27.8 million in beginning fund balance. The budget includes a use of fund balance of $8.3 million. Capital projects budgeted for the year, $2.5 million. So if everything rolls out exactly as budgeted, the total year-to-date gain loss will be $8.3 million. So we're going to see, it'll look as if the fund lost money, but there's a planned use of fund balance. Water's been accumulating fund balance over the years, and now they're beginning some major projects. So it's the same layout for the rest of the funds. Moving down to charges for services, I'd like to highlight, how our revenues are trending for the enterprise funds. That's really what's driving things. Everything's really trending pretty much on track. Golf, again, is a little under prior year, $1.6 million almost last year, year-to-date, 1.4 through here. And then the arena, the charges for services, I have a little note in here that says all arena entertainment. That's VenueWorks. Okay, so otherwise, the other side of the arena, there's two divisions in the arena fund. You've got the facility side with all the debt service and the maintenance, and then you have the VenueWorks side. It's all one fund, but it's split into two divisions. So the only charges for service revenue that we have in the arena is related to VenueWorks. $653,000. Their year-to-date budget is $467,000. So they're having a good year so far. That's concluding my presentation for the evening. I wanted to run right through that. Any questions?
Questions? Oh, Councilmember Carrillo.
Just one quick comment from somebody who's an avid watcher of these council meetings on YouTube. Wondering if there's any way that we can make these materials easier to see or available, because there are people who want to follow along, and even folks in the audience here today, it's too far away for them to see, and so then they're not as engaged as they could be. So I don't know what we can do about that, but if it's something that you can spend some time thinking about, I would sure appreciate it.
And they are available after the council meeting.
Right.
A lot of times we're working on these numbers right up into the Thursday or Friday before, so it's a little difficult to get them out there ahead of time.
Well, I mean, even one thing would be even if you're working up to them right up to while this meeting is happening, if there can be a link, if they get uploaded somewhere and there's a link and you just tell folks if you want to follow along, go to this link. Even if that link isn't made available until right when you stand up there, then people can pull out their phones and follow along there, or just whatever. Consider something.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. Mr. Gleason?
Thanks, Scott. Real quick on the budget before I move on to a couple of additional comments. Like Scott said, and like we've said the past several months, the economy appears to be healthy in Bloomington. But it just takes, a small amount to adjust those numbers, and it looks like we're on a winning track now. But that's definitely where we stand currently. So potentially provides us in the FY21 budget. We're currently in FY20, but it might allow us in FY21 to catch up on, different projects that maybe have been postponed for, obviously financial reasons. All right. Couple additional items. We had Renee Nestler, the business agent for AFSCME 699, come up and public comment and speak. And as promised, when I commented at the last meeting, I'm going to also comment this meeting. We have a city employee, Public Works, Earl Boitnott, loved by everybody that works with this man. I've got a fundraiser. He has brain cancer. Fundraiser is on November 3rd from 12 to 5 p.m., and that's at the Moose Lodge at 614 IAA Drive. Wish him the best. Here's another one that we have got Halloween downtown this past week. Had some elected attendees in full costume. Thought that was awesome. Melissa Hahn and her team as well did a great job, and it's my understanding that the numbers of the trick-or-treaters were somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,200 range. So, and we've got the space for it in the bigger, better downtown of Bloomington. So it was well attended. More to come. The last item that I was going to talk about, another win. Well, real quick, we have some events that are up on the screen. But here's one. Maybe everybody's heard of Plays in Peoria. Maybe we start a new saying, it begins in Bloomington. And what begins in Bloomington is at the Grossinger Arena. Trolls. Everybody's heard of the children's show Trolls. Trolls Live is actually going to take the next couple of weeks and prepare for their nationwide tour. And they're doing all that preparation work with their first show in a couple of weeks or mid-November at the arena. But it's a huge opportunity for us to show that we're capable of helping hosting this kind of prep work. Hopefully it gets out to the industry out there that a good starting point is right here in Bloomington. That's all I've got, Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much. Just very, very quickly, because obviously the time is late and we still have an executive session, I just wanted to congratulate the clerk's office on winning the chili cook-off. And I also, it's the first one that I've missed. I had a line of students and I wasn't able to come, but I had I always either go as Captain America or Thor, so I had my Captain America costume ready, but I was not able to use it. Some people are probably happy about that. But I do want to thank Councilmember Boland and Councilmember Emick for dressing up as, and actually, you were too. And Carrillo, yes, for our Halloween trick-or-treat. It was just amazing. When I first came here, I thought, what the hell is Jamie doing? Because I saw everybody's mother going into your business. And then I realized, it's the whole side. I thought maybe you were like giving away $100 treats or something, given how many people were coming into your place. But anyway, it was just a wonderful time. I want to thank staff, too, for all that they did. And it really did they did a great job. We closed off streets. Nobody mutated. Nobody grew extra arms. We had a great event that night. And I also want to thank regardless of whether or not people agree or disagree with the Cannabis Task Force, I want to thank them again for their work that is concluded. And I just wanted to, obviously in about 3 weeks, they did brought a lot of information to bear on a very controversial subject. And I look forward to seeing them next year at our reception for board and commission members. And that's all I have. Council members, we'll start with Alderman Matthey, and we'll just go around.
So, thank you to city staff and Downtown Development Division for the work they did for the downtown trick-or-treating. I think the favorites I heard of the night were the police and fire departments requested to set up next to each other and spent the entire evening photobombing each other. So everybody had a great time. The kids were having an amazing time coming around after that. We did have double the attendance that we had last year. So yeah, between 11 and 1,200. And the downtown businesses are already working on how to make it bigger next year. The next thing I wanted to give another shout out to the BCPA. Last week I mentioned that Beautiful was coming to the BCPA, and that did completely sell out. There was a waiting list of about 75 people that still wanted to go, but unfortunately we can't put more people in the building past a certain point, so that was awesome. Wanted to also mention that Deputy City Manager Billy Tyus and I went to Aurora a couple weeks ago, and while we were up in Aurora talking to them about some of their smart city initiatives and what they're doing, we also saw that Urban Equities Properties had invested in and just done a groundbreaking for a reclaiming an older building in Aurora as well. So the mayor and the staff in Aurora had nothing but good things to say about them, so thought I would share that. And then the final thing I have is, Tim, I have a question for you. The Dimmitz Grove neighborhood plan was supposed to be on the agenda tonight, and it got bumped. And the neighbors have gotten bumped now like 7 times, and they just would like to know when we're going to get this in front of council. So.
Yeah, it's no doing of ours. It's trying to coordinate the spokesperson for that group to come present the neighborhood plan.
Okay.
I think we're going to have that come at the Committee of the Whole in November. Make the presentation to council is what we've queued up, and would be an agenda item for the last meeting in November.
Thank you. Councilmember Bolin?
Yeah, I would like to also thank the police and fire for being at the trick-or-treat, because the kids really did enjoy that a lot. And last week I went to a presentation by Chuck Marone, hosted in Oglesby, and he's the founder of Strong Towns. I have his book. The philosophy really is to make towns sustainable, primarily small towns, which we would qualify for. And I've been following him for several years, and I pretty much have adopted his policy, and I'm going to, well, I can't really push it on the council, but I will continue to advocate to make, because his philosophy is common sense, and it will put the community on solid financial footing. And that is my goal. I'm a bean counter. I'm a very, very, very fiscally responsible, and he is too. So,
Thank you. Councilmember Ewing.
I'm also a fan of Strong Towns, as you know, Donna. Just by the way, I don't know if anyone has listened to PodBN, which is a local long-form interview show put on by Tyson Moore and Justin Boyd. And at one point, Tyson interviewed Chuck Marone, like in the last year, to talk about Bloomington Normal. The other thing about them that's great is that his staff is they represent such a diverse political point of view, which is really incredible. I loved Halloween. I love the dinosaurs. Did they come from your shop, Jamie? The walking dinosaurs?
No.
They were so cool.
Yeah.
I love those. Well, I'll be sure to
Do I wanted to eat all the little children. Wanted to put them in my soup.
But on a very serious note, I want to say a big thank you to Bob Mart of Community Development and Chris Hazel, and I attended a walkthrough of an apartment last week on Douglas, and a resident's mom had communicated the state of this, and I got in touch with Community Development and was invited to go. I was very impressed with the professionalism and care that Chris Hazel took as he walked through the building, but I was also kind of devastated in what poor shape it was in. And it was a good reminder to me to just pay more attention around my ward, around this community, about places where people might not be able to advocate for themselves. and that I'm pledging to do a better job, and I wanted you all to join me in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carrillo.
Yeah, trick-or-treating downtown was amazing, so huge shout-out to the staff that made it happen. I don't know if you all know this, but Donna and Julie and I, all three showed up in witch costumes without having coordinated that. And then Julie made that voice all night, which is kind of terrifying and also really fun. And then also, another fun thing that happened, CM Promotion gave us a bunch of whoopee cushions, so we got to explain to kids who didn't know what whoopee cushions were, what to use them for. It was awesome. So thanks to those folks for giving us those. Dia de los Muertos was a big success, and love supporting the museum and the work that they're doing. So want to highlight one of the events is the opening of a Community in Conflict, which maybe resonates with some of us up here. November 9th is the opening, and one of the people that will be present there will be the person who was the recipient of our Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation. And I'm not going to say more, but it's going to be awesome, and so you all should check it out.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to say I have a lot of questions typically for these meetings, and I always get fulsome and quick responses to my questions. So I don't think I can thank Tim and Leslie and staff enough for what they do. So wanted to make that known. And then I want to ask, and this thought kind of occurred to me with regard to Connect Transit and the intergovernmental agreement. I think we're supposed to be receiving monthly reports. Are we receiving monthly reports? Or maybe I'm wrong on that.
No, I've not received an update in a little while.
Okay, and how long would be a little while? Sorry.
I know I asked a lot of questions. Let me ask some more questions.
It's probably been a couple of months, but I do know that some of our representatives are more than willing. If we want them to have a placeholder, let's say at a committee to hold meeting, to provide an ongoing update, they would do that. I know Judy Buchanan would.
And is that, once they do provide reports, is that something that you could share with council, their monthly reports to you, or is that something that?
I'll do it whatever way you want. I was actually talking about a placeholder and, until completion, at the committee of the whole meeting, an actual agenda item. Okay. Or I could provide updates via email to everybody, but given the topic, would imagine the community is interested, I could do that under my city manager update.
Okay, great.
I will do that. I will find a way.
And then I just, a couple things I didn't get to say in the cannabis discussion, or at least one. I know that we have to keep in mind that there may be things that we as a city are limited in regulating, but the state has pretty stringent regulations, and they will come down heavy on a business, any type of cannabis business that does not comply with the statutory requirements. So I just wanted to make that known. And then I'll just kind of say this at the end here, but and I'm guilty of this sometimes, of being overzealous. I've done this both before I'm on council and after. And I think that while certain members of the community are very passionate about some issues, I just don't know, and certainly they have a right to say whatever they want to say and however they want to say it, but sometimes that can be kind of counterproductive, I would say, and certainly I've been guilty of that sometimes too. So just wanted to make that statement.
Yeah. Well, actually, there are some limits that the excuse me, that the chair of the meeting, mayors, can do if they go, and I think we were kind of on that borderline. People raised voices and specifically picking out members of the council. I'm not going to have them sit down if they're criticizing the mayor, but if they're going after council members and their voices are raised, I think that that can be curtailed. Councilmember Bray.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that. And I wanted to thank Alderman Massey for calling out the musical Beautiful because I had the opportunity to attend, and I think I bought one of the very last tickets, but I still had a really good seat. It was a really great performance, and I'd like to see us replicate that more. Jay Tetzloff and Friends of the BCPA, shout out to them and shout out to Jay for a great job in bringing in that talented group. We just need more, because obviously we're going to support it as a community. It's just was really fabulous, so thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. At this point, we are going to go into executive session, and we're going to just have a brief minute or two as we're going to making that transition. You are all welcome to stay for our really exciting motion to adjourn, but we are not going to do anything public after this, and we're not even going to say the word cannabis. So that's totally up to you, but in the executive session, I need a motion to go into executive session, and then once that's approved, if we could, we'll take about a minute or two recess. So that we can clear the room. Moved by Alderman Matthews, or second?
Second.
Can you
Second
state,
by-
can you state why, sorry,
Oh,
why
I'm
we're
sorry.
going into executive
For the reasons
session?
that are specified under number 12 on our executive session agenda, which is review of minutes and a claim settlement. Okay? And is that okay with the maker of the motion?
Still so moved.
Is that okay with the... Okay. Could you call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey?
Yes.
Councilmember
Yes.
Boland? Councilmember Milwambwe?
Yes.
Councilmember Emig?
Yes.
Councilmember Painter?
Yes.
Councilmember Creel?
Yes.
Councilmember Black? Councilmember Crable? Councilmember Bray?
Yes.
Okay. You're going to have to be quick, Howard.